Hey guys, Craig with Single Length School, and today I've got a special video for you. We're talking golfing smarter, not harder, but we're not giving you guys a tip. We're actually going to look at some of the top pros and see if single length irons are something they should be considering. Let's dive in. Alright, so if you're new to the channel or you haven't yet done so, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button down below, hit the notifications bell right beside it, and when we're done, if you find this video useful, smash that like button down below. It looks like this. Also, don't forget to check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram. You can search us at Single Length School. Over on Twitter, search at One Length School, and don't forget about the website, singlelengthschool.com. So, I got bored the other day, and I've been nursing some injuries, haven't been able to get out swinging like I want to, which hopefully that changes today. I think I'm getting to a point where I can swing, but over the last few days, I've been doing some research, and I've been taking a look at some numbers, and something dawned on me. What if we took a look at the top players in the world in the game of golf? And we know those top players are on the PGA Tour. Let's take a look at some stats from 2020 and see if we can't identify potentially a player or two that may benefit from switching to single length irons, or one length irons for you guys that call them one length. So I did a little bit of research, jumped on the PGA Tour's website, jumped into their statistics page, and what we're looking at is greens in regulation percentage. And really what I focused in on is the same issues a lot of amateurs have, and that is your longer irons in the bag. So what I did is I found 4 players. All 4 of them are major champions. I know for a fact 3 of the 4, and I actually think all 4, again, I should look this up real quick, but 3 of the 4 are definitely FedEx Cup champions. I believe the 4th did it as well, but I'm not 100% positive on that one. So I'm going to show you some numbers, but here's what we looked at, and here's what I took into account. So we looked at green in regulation percentage from 150 to 175 yards, which for a lot of guys, even amateurs and the pros, when they're swinging to make good contact, that's usually about a 7 or 8 iron for most guys. So I took that into factor. And then I looked at 175 to 200, which for a lot of guys is your 5 iron, 6 iron, some cases a 4 iron. But I did it with Tour Pros. And so those are the 2 yardage categories I'm looking at in our greens in regulation percentage. And I'm going to pull up the chart here very shortly, but I just want to explain a little bit more about the study and why I did it this way. So as I said, that 150 to 175, most guys is going to be a 7 or 8 iron, which single length or one length clubs, that's the length of club you're getting. And then again, the longer irons that they're using, which in their case are variable. Now, Bryson is not included in this because he's already playing single length or one length irons. But these other Tour Pros, these other 4 that I've pulled from, they do play the variable length irons. So I wanted to see if from their typical 7, 8 iron length to their 4, 5, 6 iron length, is there a big disparity in greens and regulation percentage that they may want to consider playing single length or one length irons at the top of the bag? Why didn't I go shorter yardages? Well, let's face it, the pros, their short games are insane. You put them in inside 125 yards and they're going to be money. So I didn't want to go that far down the rabbit hole. I just wanted to look at the typical amateur correction. So the 7 to 8 iron, and then what you can see with their 4, 5, 6 irons. So let's dive in and let's pull up this chart right now. I'm going to leave this chart up here while we talk through it a little bit. So now you can see the chart, and let's take a look here and see what we're looking at, and let me kind of explain it to you a little bit. So as you can see that on the left-hand side of this chart, I've got the distances listed, the percent difference from the 150 to 175 and the 175 to 200 in greens in regulation. So first off, let's take a look at the tour average, which is that first column there. Greens in regulation percentage from 150 to 175 across the tour, and now these stats are pulled from 2020, so not this year, but last PGA Tour season. Greens in regulation percentage, the tour average was 63.85, so let's call it 64% from 150 to 175. From 175 to 200, now it drops to 55.81% or 56%, so it's about an 8% difference. Now, what's that mean in terms of normal discussion? You know, something that we can all understand. Well, if you hit 100 shots from 150 to 175, these pros are going to hit the green 64% of the time. 64 shots out of 100, they hit the green. They hit another 100 shots that's 175 to 200, and instead of 64 out of 100, now they're only hitting 56 out of 100. So it's 8 shots worse. So right there, you can almost maybe make a case that across the board, most pros are going to benefit and see some improvement in their greens and regulation by switching to something more consistent such as single length or one length irons, because it's the same setup, it's the same swing. Let the loft on the club adjust for the difference. So you can make that claim right off the bat and say, hey, it could potentially improve the tour average by 8%. But I wanted to dive a little bit deeper because really 8% at that level isn't that much. And most of the tour players, their approach 175 to 200 is on a par 5 or an extremely long par 4. So they really don't hit a lot more shots in that 175 to 200 range than what you or I would. Now, keep in mind, some pros are longer than others, just like with us amateurs. But let's dive back into the chart here and let's look at player A. Now, player A is a past major champion. He is most definitely one of the former Tour Championship recipients. He has won the Tour Championship. Now, it was quite a number of years ago, but he has also played in Ryder Cups, President's Cups. So this player has a lot of resume, a lot of power behind his resume. If you look, and believe it or not, in the 150 to 175 category, which is that 7 to 8 iron length, 81.88%, 82% greens in regulation. And he is number 1 in that category for 2020. He was the top player in greens and regulation in that distance range. What's really concerning and what's eye-popping is if you look at 175 to 200. In that 175 to 200 range, his greens and regulation percentage drops to 56.2%. That's a 26% difference. And this is a guy that is a little bit shorter, so he does hit more of these 175 to 200 approach shots than what the other guys in our study do. But think about that for a second. 25% difference. How many strokes did that cost him? Now, I couldn't go get into all those analytics. That'd take me months and months to really get how many strokes that cost him. But right off the bat, think about that huge number. That's a 25% difference. Right there. I'm going to tell you, and you're probably already thinking it, that player A, his longer club should be single length or one length irons to increase his consistency, to find those greens more often. And I'm willing to bet if he would bump that from 56.2% to say 65%, I'd say that he probably would win a couple more tournaments just because of that, because the guy is a great short game player. Okay, let's move on to player B. Now, player B in this group is a former world number 1, major champion, tour champion, Ryder Cup, President's Cup, one of the bigger names on tour. What's unique is out of the 4 players I picked, player B is the only one that showed improvement from longer range. That's right, player B actually improved his greens in regulation percentage from 175 to 200 over 150 to 175. That's crazy. But that tells me something. That made me think. If the club that player B is using from 175 to 200, if that were to be the standard for player B in his 1-iron or single length iron club length, so let's say that 175 to 200 is his 6 or his 5-iron, what would that do? If that's a comfortable enough club that player B is showing improvement in his greens and regulation percentage. Now, granted, it's only fractional. I mean, it's not even a full 0.25%. It's 0.24% improvement. But could that number, if that is his 5-iron, would it make sense that maybe the rest of his irons in his bag go to 5-iron length? And now maybe do his, or does his percentage from 150 to 175 increase because of that? That's a very good question, and that's something that I don't want to say that player B should do. I think player B having the same consistency and almost identical percentages from 150 to 175 and 175 to 200, I think player B is fine playing the variable lengths. I don't think it would benefit him to go into a single length. And if I were to recommend single length or 1-length irons for player B, it would actually be to whatever that length of his 175 to 200 club is. So his 6-iron length or his 5-iron length. That was a unique one, and I was actually pretty impressed to see that. But let's take a look at player C. Again, player C, multiple major championships, Ryder Cup, President's Cup. He's the only one on the list. I'm not 100% sure that he's a tour champion. I believe he was, but I'm not 100% positive. Let's take a look at player C's numbers. So pull the chart back up here, and you can see player C from 150 to 175, greens in regulation percentage is 59%. 175 to 200 is 50.61%. That's an 8.4% difference. So again, right on that tour average. That tour average is an 8% difference. Player C is an 8% difference. Player C is a player that's going to be hitting more of those 175 to 200 shots. Not quite as long as the other guys, but a little bit longer than player A. So you do see player B, or player C, excuse me, hitting more of the 175 to 200 approach shots than you do player B, or in this case, when we get to player D. Is there a potential improvement there for player C using 1-length or single length irons? Well, I think there is, because if player C improves by 4%, so let's say he's hitting 4 more greens out of 100, at that level, at the PGA Tour level, that's something that can really change the score over the course of 4 rounds. That may be another 1 or 2 birdies, maybe even 3 birdies or an eagle over the course of 4 days. And that could be the difference between making the cut and missing the cut. Could be the difference between a top 50 position and a top 10 position. And player C is somebody that has been known over the last past couple years to be struggling. And now that I say that, you guys can probably pick out who this guy was. He has struggled over the last few years, especially with irons. So I think for player C, 1-length or single length irons may be something to consider for player C. Even though that percentage is on the tour average, I think, especially with the struggles he's had lately, I think it's something he should take a look at very closely to see if he can improve his consistency and hit the greens more. Player D, another multiple major champion, a PGA Tour champion, so he's won the Tour Championship, Ryder Cup. This guy is a #1 in the world, or has been a #1 in the world, I should say. Let's look at his percentages. 59.68, so 60%, 150 to 175, and he drops to 52.5%, 175 to 200. That's a 7% difference for player D. Now, again, player D is not hitting as many 175 to 200 approach shots because player D is another very, very long hitter. So, what are my thoughts for player D with a 7% change? That's a tough one. I think player D is probably okay staying with variable length because player D is so long that he's not using as many 4, 5, or 6 irons as approaches into the green. So player D is more of a comfort player, and because he's been playing variable length so long, I'm probably just going to say to player D, stick with your variable lengths, just because you're not hitting those longer clubs as much, and the 7% difference, you're probably not going to see enough of an improvement. Maybe 1 or 2 more birdies over 4 days for player D. Now, that brings up a good point. 1 or 2 more birdies for player D. Maybe it keeps a couple bogeys off the card switching to one length. Does that get him anything over the past couple years? Past couple majors? It put him even more in the mix. And because of his mental toughness with the game, it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back and really gets this guy back over the hump and back to where he needs to be to get back to #1 in the world. But so let's take a look at the blind players, player A, B, C, and D. Who do I really think needs to go to one length or single length irons? It's going to be player A and player C. Who can get away without staying from single length irons or one length irons and probably wouldn't see a dramatic improvement? Players B and player D. So now let's show you guys the players. And I think you guys are going to be pretty surprised. You're going to know all of these names. Player A is Jim Furyk. Now, Jim Furyk's been known to be one of the best ball strikers of his era, even though his swing's a little awkward. He has that really high takeaway, gets it back here, spins it, and brings it in. But again, he's a major champion. He's a tour champion. He's been on Ryder Cups and President's Cups. He's now competing on the Champions Tour, which I think is another place where single length or one length irons would benefit him by having a more consistent setup and swing across all his irons. And much like me, Jim Furyk's a Western Pennsylvania guy. His family, he still has family in Western Pennsylvania. He's a huge Pittsburgh Steelers fan, as am I. So Jim, next time you're in the Pittsburgh area, I hope you watch this, but next time you're in the Pittsburgh area, come see me, hit me up. Let's really discuss if single length or one length irons are going to help improve your game and maybe get you a couple more tour wins. Player B is current world #1, Dustin Johnson. And again, as I talked about when we were talking about him as player B, there was improvement in that longer distance category over what is typically probably more of a 7 or 8 iron distance for him. I don't think Dustin's going to benefit from it. He's pretty much tied into TaylorMade at this point. I don't see any benefit of one length or single length irons for him. He's doing just fine the way he is. Player C, again, multiple major champion, Ryder Cup, President's Cup. Meet Mr. Jordan Spieth. As I said when we were talking about player C, in this case Jordan's been struggling the past few years. It seems like he just can't get his game together. And I think what you're seeing with Jordan is he's not quite as long as DJ or player D, who is yet to be revealed, but he's not quite as long as those guys. He's hitting more longer irons into greens than what these guys are. And I think a player like Jordan, who's been struggling for many years, I mean, he's still an elite level player. He's still making millions of dollars a year. But for somebody that hasn't won on tour for a while, and his irons and his driver seem to be struggling, I know the driver's really a big thing for him, but if you look at the numbers, there's an 8% difference, and he's only hitting 50% of the greens in regulation from 175 to 200 yards. I think because of those numbers, Jordan makes a good candidate to really consider single length or one length irons. If he can get those into his 7-iron setup or his 8-iron setup and match that across all his irons, I think Jordan's going to be a lot more consistent, and we know once he's on the green, he's a good putter. So all we got to do is get Jordan onto the green more. Instead of hitting the green half the time from 175 to 200, let's see if we can't get you to 60 or 65%. And I'm willing to bet that difference is going to get you a couple more tour wins, put you in more contention for majors. So I think Jordan Spieth is another contender for single length or one length irons. Player D. Let's reveal player D now. Player D is Mr. Rory McIlroy. So multiple major champion, former world #1, Ryder Cup participant, tour champion. This guy's done a lot. He's still looking and will probably get at some point the career Grand Slam. Now, Rory, much like Jordan, struggles a little bit more on those 175 to 200. In fact, he's at 52%. So now with Rory, I think 52% is a little misleading in that 175 to 200 yard category. Why? Because Rory's so long that he's not hitting a lot of irons in that 175 to 200. Majority of the time, that 175 200 is probably on par 3s. He's usually hitting 7 or 8 irons and inside that 175, even on the longest par 4s. So Rory, I don't think is really a candidate for single length or one length irons just because he's not hitting those clubs as much. Now, if he was hitting them more, then I think there's a good consideration that Rory should take to give one length or single length irons a try. But because he's so long, he's not hitting or trying to hit that distance as much. I think he's probably okay sticking with his current variable length setup. So, guys, I'm sure there's a lot more guys on tour, but I at least wanted to pull 4 names that you were familiar with. Guys that have won majors, guys that have won tour championships, been on Ryder Cups, President's Cups. These are all golfers that have golfed at the very highest level. And I wanted to see what they did in 2020. If you look down the board through all the players in 2020, you're going to find more PGA Tour pros that are going to benefit from playing single length or one length irons. I just don't have the time to go through all 200 players that played in an event last year to say, hey, there's 15, 20 guys that here are their names. They should be playing single length or one length irons. I thought it were better if I give you some well-known names. And in this case, you're seeing that 2 out of the 4, I think could really benefit from switching or strongly considering single length or one length irons. Now, who do they go for? I know they've got contracts with their current club makers, but again, they want somebody that's been working with some tour pros or somebody that's been out there for a while that understands the single length and one length world. You guys have got Pinhawk out there. You've got One Iron Golf. Those are 2 of the smaller names out there, but have been doing it so long, they could really help the tour pros. And then you've got guys that work with tour pros, just like Cobra or Edel Golf. Edel works with a lot of tour pros with their putters. They have the one length iron options. So and Edel actually worked with Bryson before Bryson went to Cobra. So Edel and Cobra are 2 of the bigger names that if Jim Furyk and Jordan Spieth wanted to go to a well-known manufacturer, I'm sure Cobra or Edel would be more than happy to give them a test and help them get into a set of single length. If they just want to test them on their own, they can give One Iron or Pinhawk a shot. There's other companies out there, but guys, this was a fun study. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Jordan, Jim, you guys catch this, I'm going to tag you in it. But if you guys watch this, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to discuss how one lengths could help you guys. As I said, Jim, next time you're in town, hit me up. Let's hit the range up and let's discuss it. But I hope that helps you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Now, I'm going to go hit the range, work on my game a little bit. So maybe one day I might be able to say that I'm on that list as well. Let's be honest, it's not going to happen. I'm 36, I'm old, my bones are falling apart, but I just want to play better golf. So I'm going to go hit the range. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Follow us on social media. Hit us up at singlelengthschool.com. And until next video, keep it in the fairways.